I'm Attila Katona. I will briefly explain our findings in Hungary. But since I couldn't be here with you yesterday, I just a quick introduction. I'm an economist from Hungary. I have a small business in London. We are making biogas digesters for Africa, which is quite interesting. But recently I've been working in Frankfurt on sustainable urban development. And a year ago there was a call from Erika looking for volunteers to take part in this research, and since I'm very interested in bottom-up solutions, I was very interested. So let's start with our motivations. As it has been explained, we were trying to examine a bridge between this business efficiency and social impact. How can we integrate this bottom-up cooperative structure into existing Hungarian systems? Can it play a role in poverty alleviation, rural development and employment? Is it a real alternative or just a desperate adaptation mechanism? These are very interesting questions. We wanted to create a coherent summary because we found a lot of contradictions between definitions. We found a lack of research in this field and a lot of unclear legal, social and economic background. We wanted to produce a guideline for decision makers, business actors, stakeholders, and also to find interconnections between these cooperatives and with other cooperatives in the Visegrad countries. This is the research team. We are mostly young professionals, and Erika was coordinating the research in Hungary. I believe this has already been discussed yesterday. We were looking at bottom-up, marketable, self- and community management solutions, which a very relevant legal form for this in Hungary is the social cooperative, which is a new legal structure set up in 2006. It differs from the normal cooperatives. I will briefly explain why. Social cooperatives combine economic goals with social, educational, cultural and environmental goals. They are very democratic structures. Usually each member has one vote. They have a very strong job creational, community organization aspect and integration functions. They meet local needs, and they are also a very good decentralized option to substitute the current public work program, which is now the mainstream way of dealing with unemployment in Hungary, and it's not being very efficient or effective. So we were examining if we can bridge traditional profit-oriented cooperatives and non-profit organizations with this structure. As you can see, social cooperatives are combinations of a lot of actors and resources. History in a nutshell. We had a cooperative movement starting in the end of the 19th century with Hangya. Rough translation is the ant, being the most prominent advocate of cooperativism. It had 700,000 members, dozens of canneries, industrial plants, 400 shops, 2,000 member cooperatives, so it was very successful until the end of the Second World War, where everything was forced into collectivization. There was no compensation for private ownership, and this continued until the system change in the early 90s, where since everybody was fed up with the system, there was a mass abandonment and elimination of cooperatives in Hungary, and even till this day, the word cooperative has a negative connotation in it. Meanwhile, in international level, the UN, EU, they strongly support cooperatives, and we have seen a big expansion, especially in Western Europe, since the 90s. We only had a new regulation, a new fresh breath of air in 2006 with the new cooperative law, which also introduced the social cooperatives. But this was not enough to bring the renaissance of the social cooperatives. They had to set up funding structures and make open calls for incubation. This happened in 2007, and since 2007 we have some kind of funds available on an annual basis, mostly EU funds, but also some allocated governmental funds, usually providing between 50,000 and 150,000 euro per social cooperative. We have foreseen this trend continuing as the social cooperative expression is still part of the future rural development program. So this is probably the way it's going to happen in the next years as well. Here, some statistical results. These are on the left graph. You can see the number of social cooperatives. It's been rising very rapidly, almost doubling each year. There is an estimation of about 2,000 social cooperatives now in Hungary, but experts said that probably about 250 is really operational and working efficiently. Regarding the spatial distribution, there is a cluster in Budapest and also in the poorer areas of Hungary, eastern Hungary, as you can see on the map as well, on the graph on the bottom left. About half of the cooperatives in the statistical database were from the two easternmost regions of Hungary, so we think it's a good trend because they work where their work is very needed. Regarding the sectoral distribution, they mostly do services, all kinds of services from washing to IT services, childcare. There is more than 100 types of social cooperative. They also do handicrafts such as creating wooden elements, furniture, handmade food. There is also a small fraction of agricultural social cooperatives. So this is about statistics. From now on, we'll talk about our empirical research, which we conducted in the last 8 months, more or less. We examined 25 social cooperatives briefly and chose 6 for an in-depth case study. The structure of this case study was provided by the research program. We conducted semi-structured interviews with these social coops, especially the leaders and the members. We did the questionnaires, we did the focus group discussion with co members, we interviewed stakeholders, customers, employees, even local authorities, and we have done site visits in Budapest and in the countryside. There was a site visit that lasted for 3 days. It was a very productive one. We also interviewed some experts along the way in different stages of the research. So this is our 6th case study. I will just go through briefly. Each of them is a very unique one. The first one is a communal social cooperative. Their main profile is a charity shop franchise. If you know the British charity shop model, it's a very similar one, but it hasn't been implemented in Hungary before. They currently have 3 operational charity shops and planning to open 2 more each year. But these charity shops employ disadvantaged people. They provide cheap goods also for the disadvantaged and recycle a lot of waste back into the economy. So they have a strong environmental aspect. An estimated 80 tons of waste recycled back into the economy. They also do recycling workshops and design, which can also be sold in their shops. They have a bioenergy solution for rural poverty. They have trainings for other cooperatives and also other charity shops. So there is more than 6 charity shops that open thanks to their trainings on charity shops. So it's also been very effective. Yeah, they also had a very interesting program called Homeless People into Policy. They lifted homeless people and helped them learn the administrative language so they can work for municipalities and provide feedback on ongoing policies. And they are working on a very democratic basis. Everybody who works in their shops, who takes part in their workshops regularly, has a vote, and they don't decide unless all members agree. It's a very effective democratic system. The next one is Godoya. They have 2 main profiles. One is local food supply and trade, farm store in Godolo, which is an agglomeration city near Budapest. And they also have a homemade meal for Waldorf schools. The Waldorf system is an alternative semi-private school system. The founder of this social cooperative was also the founder of the first Waldorf school, so this is why they started to work with these kind of schools, and they bring meals. The problem with this structure was they needed a lot of initial investment, which none of the funding sources provide, so he had to pick up a huge personal loan to finance the infrastructure needed for a high-quality kitchen. And this led to also centralized decisions, because since he was the one bearing all the costs, he also had to make all the decisions. And right now it's more like a committee or the team behind him, but the decision making is very centralized. This is what we have found. Currently they struggle with sales. They need 500 mil to break even, currently selling about half of this amount. And they also have a problem with cheaper industrial competition, who produce meals for about 20% cheaper, since it's not coming from the farmers directly, it's not being prepared in a homemade way. And they also struggle with the bureaucracy, all kinds of regulations, laws, and new taxes that are being introduced. But they have good future prospects. They just won EU funding for a 1,000 meal kitchen, so hopefully this will bring them the break-even they really need for quite some time. They are now building this kitchen in one of the Waldorf schools, planning to supply 15 Waldorf schools from this kitchen alone. The first Hungarian renewable energy cooperative. A very interesting name. Unfortunately, we found out they are not being really active cooperative, but they have very, very nice plans. They want to provide energy independence for farmers with their local renewable systems, industrial symbiosis. The next one, social meeting hub called the Stork Goya. It's a community center, a restaurant hub. They keep concerts, folk dance events, exhibitions, discussions in the heart of Budapest. It has a very, very interesting history, 130-year-old pub, but it closed in the end of the 80s and just recently reopened by young people. They have a lot of fresh ideas, they share responsibilities, the maintenance of this pub. Their main goal is to provide well-being and good community for the members, also have a financially sustainable community center, and which can then catalyze a lot of bottom-up movements and a social meeting place. Currently they are a bit threatened by the expansion of the modern city, since they are in the edge of an expanding modern city center in Budapest. We will see, but the team is very active, so even if they have to move, the community will move with them, hopefully. The last one in the case study is a Freshco Village social cooperative. This is probably the one you may have heard about previously. It's in Bodvalenka. Bodvalenka is an extremely disadvantaged gypsy village in eastern Hungary. It has about 200 inhabitants. 110 of them is underage children. They wanted to prove that the gypsy village can make it. There was an initiative of Esther Pastor, who is not a local, but now mostly lives in Bodvalenka. Her initiative was to paint high-quality gypsy frescoes or wall paintings in the village houses. Before. And there was also renovation of village houses and these paintings. It gained international fame and recognition. The Washington Post, Times, the BBC, Al Jazeera, they were all coming there and making articles about this. There was a big fame at some point. They even got invitations to the European Parliament in Brussels. The gypsy women went there to sing. Most of them hasn't even been to the regional city, and now they went to Brussels, so it was a very nice experience for them and for everybody who took part in their show. They did the Dragon Festival in 2011, 1,500 visitors. They opened up to the world that year, but unfortunately none of these touristic attractions were able to bring permanent job opportunities. They couldn't really keep the money there. So tourists arrive, they take photographs, but then they leave, and there is basically no income for them from all this fame. And the income per capita is still less than 40 euro per person per month, since there is only 3 people employed in the whole village. One of them is a mayor, the other one is the administrative hub of the mayor. So it's not a very good situation for them. Most of them is trying to get into the public works scheme as much as possible, but since there is really nothing to do in the area, it's very hard to provide them anything. There has been a lot of efforts to get out of this poverty trap, mostly by Esther Pastor, who also initiated the Freshco Village project. One of them is the biomass project. They wanted to collect, since the area is very rich in biomass, very healthy forests, they wanted to launch a biomass wood collection project where local people would collect wood, then process it, which could be sold to the regional power plant. Unfortunately, so they won funding for this from a social cooperative funding source. They had enough points to get the funding, so they started to work immediately. They collected a lot of wood during the month, but there was still no payment from the government, because there was some restructuring in the government, and basically nobody was answering their emails and calls. After half a year, they went bankrupt because there was still no payment, and they couldn't rent the machines to process the wood. Winter came, the wood was stolen, so the whole project ended up being not really a successful one. And they also had strong opposition from the local economic power, the mayor, who also owns all the land in the area. He wasn't happy that people are trying to break out from this current situation. Every time they wanted to start working, he invited them for a public work, which you shouldn't refuse, because then you will lose the favor of the mayor. So it was a big struggle between Esther and the mayor. Esther wanted to help the locals, the mayor wanted to preserve the current situation, and unfortunately, currently he succeeded. These solutions are usually not very system transformative, rather than an adaptation mechanism to do something for themselves locally, but they are being very innovative. There is an overwhelming demand for social co-ops, both for the jobs they provide and both for the services they provide. So, as one of our interviewees said, they are knocking on doors wide open. In a country where 1/3 of the population lives below the poverty line, these cooperatives use local social capital and knowledge, allocate local resources to meet local needs and untapped economic potential. They recognize the potential and the disadvantaged, know how to communicate with them, provide them with community and goals. We found that they are being very democratic, except with the one example I told about the loan, but otherwise the democratic structures are working according to the cooperative way. We found strong knowledge transfer element. All the cooperatives have a highly educated central figure with the leadership experience to guide the community, usually someone who initiated this and then is now working with the locals to make it happen and make it profitable. We can conclude that this is already the most suitable structure to many problems. We base this conclusion on the fact that if these cooperatives wouldn't exist, then the problems wouldn't be solved. So those people would not have jobs, and those services they provide would not be there. So it has to be a lot of potential in this, since it's happening and it's growing. And one last thought on positive side: the man has to eat. So people will find a way, be it crime, be it black market work, or be it social cooperative. If we provide them a structure so they can work for themselves in a local level, then they will do it, and this is what social coop is really about. We also found some less positive signs. since they have to comply with the laws of the market in their value-driven way, the economies of scale is not reachable for them. They lack specialization. Since they work with disadvantaged people, it can be very unproductive sometimes, since they may have been inactive for 10 to 15, 20 years, and it's hard to reintegrate them into the workforce. And I would call this a competitive disadvantage compared to traditional businesses. And this contradiction should be solved by policy background, but it did not happen yet. I would say the government gives with one hand and takes away with the other. The current regulatory system, so they provide a lot of funding right now, but the regulatory system is stopping the development of these social cooperatives. They reduce efficiency and force them out of business. Currently, less than 20% of the European Union or government-funded co-ops operate after 3 years. They found flaws in the tendering system, a lot of liquidity traps, as we have seen with the Fresco village, and also we have found serious abuses of this tendering system. An anonymous source said that out of 17 funded cooperatives, she thinks that about 15 was a strawman or some fake company that just tried to outsource workforce into a cooperative system for more profit. We think it's it's very contradictory. Cooperatives reported a gradual increase of tax, contribution and administrative burden, centralization, and a lot of anti-poor policies. We believe that, as I said, most of the cooperatives are not operational after 3 years. We believe that with a better policy background and incubation system, these problems could be solved, and even now inactive cooperatives could flourish. By solving these contradictions, we could create a competitive cooperative model that can be a building block of social innovation and survive without further top-down funding. Strengthening the local economies is national, regional and European interest as well. And just a final thought, that we all know that this is just a drop in the ocean, these social cooperatives, but they have a very strong message, so let's hope that they can gain some momentum and build into some kind of movement. So thank you for your attention, and